Hey guys, welcome back. So today I'm doing an interview with a project named Sovryn. So these guys are basically combining everything that we're sort of doing in the DeFi space on ERC20 tokens. However, they're launching their project purely within the Bitcoin ecosystem. And so this allows people to experience all the joys of DeFi, hopefully without the rug pulls, in the Bitcoin ecosystem without needing to wrap their Bitcoin in something like a wrapped BTC token or something like that within Ethereum. So it's an interesting project. The interview is about 30 minutes long, just over, so it's quite sharp. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. As you can see, I'm currently in Dubai, so it's a bit of a change in background. However, I am aiming to get a video out this week on 5 ways in which you can earn in DeFi because I said that I would. Anyway, enjoy. Thank you. All right, well, welcome everybody back to an interview that we've got with a company called Sovryn, and I've got the CEO Yago with me. So, Yago, why don't you just tell us a little bit about maybe a couple of sentences on essentially what Sovryn is?
Sure. So Sovryn isn't a company, and I'm not the CEO. I'm a contributor to an open source project, which is building what we see as the next important step for Bitcoin, which is to take our decentralized currency and stop having to put it into centralized platforms and provide decentralized alternative to those platforms. So what Sovryn is it's a way that you can trade Bitcoin, leverage trade Bitcoin, borrow and lend Bitcoin through a decentralized platform, which is built on Bitcoin layer 2.
Okay, that's good. So if you could just give me a brief history on how you, or actually on you personally, just tell me about your journey, about what led you into crypto, and then what steps you needed to take to put you where you are right now, contributing to this project.
Right. So I grew up in apartheid South Africa to a family of people who for generations had been causing trouble for authorities. My family at the time were involved with the ANC, and they had been declared to be terrorists by the apartheid government. And I had grown up in stories of, having to deal with fighting the Nazis or running away from Soviet Russia, which is how the family ended up in South Africa in the first place. And so by the time I was 11, I was already smuggling gold out of South Africa in order to get funds to my family due to capital controls. And I'd also already been quite politically active, and I've remained sort of very mission driven ever since. Not just myself, but my brother as well, Ilan, he's also contributing to Sovryn. And for the last, ever since we've kind of heard about Bitcoin in 2011, we've been involved because we realized that it was the kind of thing that would allow families around the world to have sovereign control over their destiny, and that means sovereign control over their funds in a way which before was never possible. So from my perspective, I've been involved in Bitcoin since the beginning, because I think it's the way that we can new territories for freedom for us and for others.
That's very true. I mean, I think that one of the best things about not only Bitcoin but crypto in general is the fact that really no one can stop you from making one transaction between one account and another. So no, I appreciate that entirely. So what have you worked on in the crypto space before you sort of got involved with the current project?
So I discovered Bitcoin when I was living in the US, and I was working on a biotech startup that I had founded. My background is in neuroscience and neural networks, and we had built a system to perform detection of cancer. And I was sitting in the bowels of the lab, just reading articles on network science, and weirdly, this article came across me, which was the Satoshi white paper, and that paper that day probably changed my life. By the end of the day, I had emailed everyone I knew to tell them that this was the future and they had to get involved in it. And so a few months later, actually left my biotech company and I moved to San Francisco. I joined a games company because I wanted to learn about how to make it attractive to ordinary people to use digital assets. And since then, I've primarily been involved in the remittance space. So setting up companies to help provide remittance to different countries using Bitcoin, and with a focus on places where it's very difficult to send funds to. And then in February, when the pandemic started, a bunch of friends, all kind of like old Bitcoin buddies, we got together online and we started talking about the fact that there was a mask shortage everywhere. And so we started working to put together a network of 3D printers so that we could get masks to anywhere in the world, regardless of whatever shocks happened to the supply chain. And so we kind of reconnected that way, and we started talking about our experiences in the history and the things that we had gone through in the Bitcoin space. And then one of the things that came up was that for years, we'd always expected that there was going to be a decentralized Bitcoin exchange, that there would be a way to decentralize all of these different services that we were using. And it never really quite emerged. And so we said, screw it. And we decided to build it ourselves. And so now we're already on mainnet, and we're going to be opening access to people progressively over the next few weeks.
Oh, good. And so, I mean, we briefly touched on the history of the business. So, I mean, I guess it started earlier this year, early 2020, February 2020. And then how many people have you got involved in the team? How is it sort of structured? Is there a token involved, or, I mean, how does the whole thing fit together? I mean, from a business sense.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how many people are involved. It's very difficult to keep track. There's people...
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there are people getting involved all the time. I think that right now we have about 16 collaborators on the GitHub. So stuff is getting built out at a furious pace. The fact that you call it the business, I really like that you call it the business. Because I think one of the cool things about Sovryn is that it is a business, but it's not a company. There is no company. So in what way is it a business? It is a service or a platform. People will be able to trade, exchange, borrow, lend, and there are fees that are associated with this. And these fees are collected by the system, and they're used to fund further development of the system, and they're used to reward sort of the early developers of the system. And this is going to be done through what we're calling a decentralized stonk, like a share, right? So it's kind of like an equity token. It gives you governance rights over the system, and it gives you revenue rights if you participate in the governance. And we call that token SOV. But because it's a decentralized organization, it's not registered anywhere. There's no company behind it.
Yeah, I mean, but there's still an underlying business, which is good, because I mean the thing has to wash its face financially, otherwise it's not sustainable.
That's right.
So it's good that that's being taken. But is the token? I mean, I know that the main product is concerned with specifically Bitcoin. Is the token an ERC20 token? Is that how you're operating? The system is being built, or its own network. You've got your own separate blockchain.
The system is built on using Bitcoin layer 2, and most of the smart contracts are built on a Bitcoin sidechain called RSK.
Oh, it's on rootstock. Okay.
That's right. So it's very similar to Ethereum or to ERC20 tokens. And the primary difference is you don't need any Ethereum to transact. All of the transaction fees are Bitcoin native, and the chain itself is secured by Bitcoin proof of work. So it's merge mine with Bitcoin, and about 50% of Bitcoin proof of work is merge mine and is the hash power behind the sidechain.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good point of difference between pretty much most of the stuff that's happening in the DeFi space is that this, I guess, gives people who are currently in the Bitcoin world the opportunity to participate without having to, I guess, cross networks. I mean, people don't need to wrap their Bitcoin or get involved with something like Ren BTC or whatever, or WBTC. So that's a pretty cool part of this, is that if you're just sitting back hodling your Bitcoin, you have an opportunity to earn and participate in networks the same way that other users are currently doing on the Ethereum side.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea is to create as trust minimized, permissionless, and uncensorable a system as possible. And if you're taking Bitcoin and creating wrapped BTC, you're very far from that. It's a centralized custodian in the form of BitGo, and I think BitGo are a fine company and have done a lot of cool things, but you're still reliant on them. You can't simply withdraw your funds. You need to go through an exchange. You have to go through the whole KYC process. And so you're basically doxing yourself and placing your keys in somebody else's hands. And the fundamental principles that give us Bitcoin, that make Bitcoin special, the reason we were attracted to Bitcoin in the first place is because it's pseudonymous. You don't have to dox yourself. Your keys, your control, and those are the fundamental principles that we are looking to build in this Bitcoin layer 2 and provide additional functionality to Bitcoin. Give people additional ways to use their Bitcoin. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it will only be Bitcoin, because maybe you want to use your Bitcoin to, short ETH. So eventually that may be tradable on the exchange as well. But right now we're focused for the purposes of simplicity and testing on having a Bitcoin USD pair.
Yeah, but that's also very cool that you, the one thing you mentioned is that this is completely decentralized, and that's I guess that is the main point that you've sort of driven home in the last few points, is that there is no need to go to another chain. The entire thing is decentralized, as in there's no CEO, you all just have contributors. And then the whole thing is designed to be systemic. So there's no trust with it. You don't have to trust a human with your money in the case of this platform. Correct.
Yeah, that's right. So there is no single point of trust. It's not the same level of trustlessness as Bitcoin itself, which is why it's Bitcoin layer 2, not Bitcoin layer 1. Yeah. There is a separate chain, but it's a side chain to Bitcoin. So, I think people should be aware of the fact that when they're using this, it's not Bitcoin main chain, but it is the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, it's still done through Rootstock, which does, I guess, simply put, integrate into the Bitcoin main chain. So the next point is, why don't you just run me through, so if I've got, if I'm lucky enough to have 10 Bitcoin just sitting around in a wallet, luckily, how can I benefit from this system?
Well, we're working to make it really, really simple. You'll be able to come onto the system. You go to Sovryn.app, and you'll be able to connect your wallet, introduce your Bitcoin into the system, and then you can do one of three things right now. So the first is you can swap. So it's basically like a spot trade. Second is leverage trading. Right now, the system is offering up to 5x leverage. And the third is you can borrow or lend Bitcoin or USD. And the USD right now is in the form of a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. So we kind of break it down into two primary that we talk about. One is what we call hyper hodling, which is like if you're long Bitcoin, like a lot of people, like if you're like me, you're all in Bitcoin. But you still want more Bitcoin. So how do you do that, right? I mean, you can't buy more Bitcoin because you don't have any more fiat.
Yeah, exactly.
So what we allow you to do with Sovryn, what you can do with Sovryn is you can basically go and lever up your Bitcoin. You can say, I'm pretty convinced that Bitcoin is going to keep going up in price, so I'm willing to go 2x, 3x leverage, and that's exactly what I'm doing. The other thing that you can do is what we're calling super stacking. So you've got Bitcoin. There's a lot of people who would love to pay you interest for that Bitcoin. And so we've created this decentralized pool where you can contribute to that pool, and people can, in an over collateralized way, so you're not actually exposed to risk, and you don't have to, go through a credit check with them. You can start lending out your Bitcoin and earning on an ongoing basis interest on it, while still maintaining control of your keys and while being able to withdraw your Bitcoin when you want.
And so that is, I guess that is works. Is it at a fundamental level? It works the same way as the existing DeFi protocols, where you put your Bitcoin into the system. Someone will lend that, and then the platform itself will take its fee in between the rate that you're earning versus the rate the other person is paying, and then that's set based on supply and demand. Is it a floating interest rate like that?
Yeah, that's right. Right now it's a floating interest rate. We may add a fixed interest rate in the future. There's a lot of things that we're planning on adding. And yeah, it's very similar to some of the stuff you can see in like Ethereum DeFi, and that's no coincidence. One of the big memes in Bitcoin, certainly sort of in the early years, was that any technology which can be useful to or improve upon Bitcoin will simply be adopted by Bitcoin. And so we've kind of stopped calling ourselves Bitcoin maxis, and we call ourselves Bitcoin mutants, because we're looking to add superpowers and the next level of mutation to Bitcoin through Bitcoin layer 2. And so we think that there are things which have been developed on other chains, especially Ethereum, which are really interesting, which are decentralized, and we're bringing them to the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'll be honest. I mean, I'd probably say that Bitcoin isn't the largest holding that I have in my portfolio. I'm a degenerate, but don't judge me. But I think that it is incredibly, and a project like this is, and I'm not just saying this but I mean, I think that a project like this is incredibly valuable to onboard more people into the DeFi space, like people who say, decide to get into crypto by buying a little bit of Bitcoin or a lot of Bitcoin, or people that have held Bitcoin for a long period of time. And then it allows them to start getting involved in this big DeFi experiment that we're sort of all, anyone that's still in the industry is currently playing with. So I think it's a really, really important thing. And how do you feel about, and you sort of talked about being a Bitcoin mutant. Is there a reason why, and this is not designed to be controversial, but is there a reason why you are, I guess, would call yourself a Bitcoin maxi or a Bitcoin mutant, and you haven't sort of started to experiment with other chains, not just Ethereum, but any of the other, other chains that are out there, but specifically, I guess, Ethereum, since everything's being built on that?
Yeah, first of all, I have experimented. I've used Ethereum. I've used different applications on Ethereum. I have a huge amount of admiration for what projects like MakerDAO and Uniswap have done. I'm less enamored with some of the stuff that MakerDAO is doing right now, but I think, MakerDAO, Uniswap, Compound have all done very interesting work and have provided new ways of thinking about how we can create decentralized financial services. That said, I think you don't have to make a choice between being a degenerate and being part of the creation of a new type of sovereign money. You can do both. And the way you can do both is you can do it by working in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So if you ask, why am I all Bitcoin and I'm not Ethereum or Avalanche or Tron or any one of these other things, the answer is very, very simple. I think it comes down to the fact that if you are thinking long term, then you want to build in the most sustainable way, and you want to be part of a sustainable ecosystem. And that means Bitcoin. And the reason I mean Bitcoin is for two points. First of all, in crypto, it doesn't matter who is first, and it doesn't matter who is most innovative. What matters is who is last. And Bitcoin is built to last. The second thing is something which I call Satoshi's paradox, right? There is something almost impossible in what Satoshi did. He created something out of nothing. He created value out of nothing. He created scarcity by creating the Bitcoin. And before, there was no scarcity of Bitcoin, right? And where does the value in the crypto space come from? Where does the value in Bitcoin come from? It comes from that scarcity, that digital scarcity that he invented. Now, the entire crypto space is built around this sort of gravity well of Bitcoin. And it's built around the gravity well of Bitcoin because of Bitcoin's scarcity. One of the issues that I have with all of these other chains, and I love the fact that they exist because I think they do create opportunities for competition and they create opportunities for innovation, but ultimately they all need to collapse back into Bitcoin, and effectively none of them can ever be a money. And from my perspective, the reason I'm really interested in Bitcoin and have been interested in Bitcoin from the beginning is because I think it's the only way that you and I and people who are listening, the ordinary people in this world, can play a role, can play at all in what I call the grand game. The grand game is the game between countries, the game between sovereigns. It's a game it's what people call geopolitics. And it's always been the purview only of sovereign nations. But what Bitcoin has done is it's created a way for us to participate by creating our own money, which can be a sovereign money. And only Bitcoin can do that. If you want, we can discuss a little bit more, but I think everyone, even the founders of Ethereum, recognize, and that's why they called it, gas. It's why they use the analogy of petroleum for Ethereum. Realize that only Bitcoin has the sort of zero founder focus. The fact only Bitcoin operates like a law of nature, right? Ethereum is something that humans change. Tron is something that Justin Sun changes. Only Bitcoin is like a law of nature, and therefore only Bitcoin can be like digital gold, and therefore only Bitcoin can be our way as ordinary individuals to have a stake in this Game of Thrones of the sovereigns.
No, don't you mean that was really good. That sort of that talk about why, and that's exactly what I sort of wanted to get out. And so so thank you for that. That was actually incredibly interesting. So although I'm pretty sure you've got this covered and thought about it, however, I think it's important to talk about what are the risks involved? I mean, what risks could a potential user find themselves in? I mean, there's no risk-free system out there, but I mean, what are the risks of using this system? For anyone who was interested.
I think it's very important to understand the risk, right? So the number one rule in all of these things is do your own research. And to help, I'm gonna give a crib sheet of what I think are some of the risks. So first of all, there's always technological risk. We've seen systems be hacked or have bugs or exploits everywhere, and certainly in the Ethereum system. Now, we are using technology that is being reviewed by lots of people. It's going through audits. It's using code which has in some cases been forked from Ethereum, from projects that are effectively sort of acting as our testnet and as our bug bounty. But there's always technological risk, and so the longer the system is live without an exploit, the more secure we will feel. But that's risk number one. I would say we've taken an extremely security-oriented approach, which is kind of the way Bitcoiners think about things. But for that reason, there are no guarantees. The second thing is we're not building a Bitcoin main chain, which means that when you take your Bitcoin and you place it on RSK, you still have Bitcoin, but it's not main chain Bitcoin. And so anytime you're using Bitcoin layer 2, like RSK or like Lightning, you are exposed to different types of security guarantees and potential risks. And so if you are just purely interested in hodling, the safest, best way to do that is in a multi-sig wallet on Bitcoin, where you've made sure to properly handle the different keys. And I would suggest that, probably most people should have most of their funds stored that way. But if you do want to earn additional yield, if you do want to trade, then I think you're probably looking for a permissionless, secure system where you have as few trust requirements as possible, and that would be where Sovryn would come in.
I mean, other than obviously the trading risk, which is if you, if you go into a 5x leverage position, I'm assuming that your existing deposited Bitcoin is what you're using as collateral to leverage that position up.
That's right.
So obviously, if Bitcoin goes against you, if you take a 5x, then if Bitcoin goes against you 20%, you've done your whole account. And the other, obviously, but that's trading stuff. That's sort of, everyone should be aware of that in the world. But I mean, I'm more interested in how your technology, on the Bitcoin chain works in order to stop. Say, how is a loan protected? Especially if I'm putting collateral in and I'm depositing my Bitcoin and then someone takes, because obviously if they're borrowing my Bitcoin from me, that transaction needs to go from one wallet to another. How are you securing that? Is it only done via USD? I mean, like, how is that system put together?
Right. So right now, the only asset that people can put down as collateral is Bitcoin or USD. And they are over collateralized by over 150%. So if the price were to move very, very quickly, it's possible that those positions would not be liquidated in time and that you could be at risk of losing funds. That seems like a fairly unlikely scenario, since we've also seen other projects on much more difficult to use, sort of much more like Ethereum, is very difficult to put through a transaction. And so sometimes the transaction will fail for you just because of that. That is far less likely on RSK. And even on Ethereum, where that was the situation, having over collateralized positions lose value because participants weren't liquidated in time is a very rare occurrence. The more likely scenario, if there was a substantial price move, would be that some people would be looking to pull out their positions, right? So let's say you are one of multiple different lenders, right? And 80% of the funds have already been lent out. So if the first 20 people who try to withdraw funds will be able to withdraw their funds, but the rest will have to wait until the loans expire before they'll be able to pull out their funds. And so the bigger risk is not so much that you will lose funds as that they might become for a period illiquid.
And then you're going to be locked in the system. So you're not going to lose your money. You're just going to be at the subject to market forces for a little while the while the system's a bit illiquid. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the next steps for the project? Like, where is it moving over the next, say, 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, so over the next 3 to 6 months, right now, the system is not permissionless. It's whitelisted. So for security reasons, we don't want people rushing in and putting all of their funds in. But if you go to the website, you can register for early access, and you can receive an early access OG NFT, which will give you access to the system. We'd love people to do that and to give us feedback so that we can improve the system. We expect that the whitelist will be removed in about a month. We will then also be providing different ways in which people can, by participating in the system, also earn SOV token and then start to have a stake in the governance of the system as well. We also plan on adding a lot of different features. So we're going to make the site, the app Tor accessible. We're making it easier to move your Bitcoin. We're going to be adding additional features like the ability to shield your transactions and effectively turn the entire system into a mixer. We're looking to introduce ways in which you can take synthetic positions in stocks like Apple or Tesla without having to sell your Bitcoin. And so there's a lot of different things that people are working on right now. Lightning network integration. And we plan to continue innovating and basically taking advantage of the full richness of Bitcoin Layer 2 technology.
So it's it's like a toolbox for anything you want to do in Bitcoin now and into the future.
Yeah, that's right. I think I suspect Sovryn is going to continue evolving and will over time become one of, if not the primary protocol that people use for sort of decentralized Bitcoin DeFi.
And I think we're sort of hitting the end of what we need to cover, but just two last quick questions. And the first one being, how can people get their hands on the token? Are you guys running a private sale, or is it just people have got to get involved and start farming? I mean, how can people get their hands on the Sovryn token?
Yeah, you really are a degen. To be fair, we're making a little bit of an effort not to hype or discuss the token right now, and the reason for that is we want people to come to the system because they want to use it, not because they want to make a quick buck. And we are trying, in addition to building a technology, to building a community around it. And so ideally, we would like to have a community that is really committed to the mission before we open the floodgates with the token and get, all of the pump and dumpers in. That said,
that is the only way to do it. I mean, any project now that goes out with a token and don't have a community behind them, that's exactly what happens. And we've seen that in a number of reasonably decent projects that have sort of, listed, and then, they'll go through an initial pump, and then, all the private sellers will just dump it back down to nothing. So, but that's not new. That happened in 2017 as well. So no, that is, but I would agree that the projects that have the best, they have that sustainability not only in price action but then users are the projects that have a pre-built community.
Yeah. So
better or worse.
What I would encourage is everyone. I think the place where we have the most active community is on our Discord. If you join the Sovryn Discord server, I mean, there's something.
I'll make sure to add a link.
Yeah, please do. That would be, we're always happy to see people join and come and participate. And if you want to contribute or just learn more, that's probably where the action is happening most right now.
Okay. So essentially the answer to that is get involved. If you want the tokens, you've got to get involved in the community. But there may be opportunity in the future for the less, what would it be? Yeah, the more degenerate of you to get involved at a later date. All right. Well, thank you so much, Yago, for chatting with us today about this very, very interesting project. And I mean, my takeaways from it that have been really interesting is, number one, I think this is the first sort of, foray into DeFi that we've seen from the Bitcoin community, which is really good. Second, outside of needing to rely on other networks. Second, the fact that the project, as you mentioned, is completely decentralized. There's no CEO, but there is an underlying sustainability model to keep the thing rolling, is also really good. And the fact that obviously because of all those things, and the fact that you've got faces behind the project mean that, and I've got to say it, it's not a blatant cash grab like so many other projects we see. So, and based on your history in the industry, it's obvious that you actually give a shit about what you're building. So that's actually really positive. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting there. I actually genuinely believe that. So thank you so much for sharing the project and being open about not only your story, but obviously what the project is building. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens over the next couple of months.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. And I look forward to seeing more people in the Discord and hearing your comments, think about the system.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. And we'll see you soon. All right.